Yeah. On 44 shit, you know what I mean? Busy man. Look, when that shit drop, you step all the way on their neck, step on their neck and they head with that shit.
Fine then, I ain't show no mercy, we gon' show them boy what time it is. I pop out like I'm Samuel, I got time to kill. Haters thought I died, I survived. They don't know how I did it, got it out the mud, straight to glory. They don't know how I feel, he nice but he don't show them skills, how I show them skills. He ride but he don't work the wheel, how I work the wheel. They mad, I'm too solid, circle tight, yeah, vacuum seal. No, they want my life, I ain't worried, I got rank for real. I got real soldiers, kill for me, nigga, watch yourself. They said you been in beast mode lately, you is not yourself. When you dropping that fire, precious marriage, they inquiring. They can't stop what's coming, but I see them conspiring. Cross the line, them firing. This bitch here, finna break the spin. No kindness, I don't trust you, circle small. You can keep your features. Me and my niggas don't keep no secrets. In the field like Jeepers Creepers, say they want some smoke, dawg. So I brought these chimney sweepers. Coming like we coming, you can't even cap. These niggas don't run it like we running, bitch, don't even start. Bitch, I'm with my niggas till the end, till them do us part. So if you wanna leave, you can leave, bitch, bless your heart. Fine then, I ain't show no mercy, we gon' show them boy what time it is. I pop out like I'm Samuel, I got time to kill. Haters thought I died, I survived. They don't know how I did it, got it out the mud, straight to glory. They don't know how I feel, he nice but he don't show them skills, how I show them skills. He ride but he don't work the wheel, how I work the wheel. Ooh, I got a man, circle tight, yeah, vacuum seal. I heard they want my life, I ain't worried, I got rate for real. Take over in effect, yeah, I'm fully focused. You might not see it on me, just know it's women, that bitch fully loaded. Ooh, yeah, we up and rolling. Told them I need major motion. Think I'm joking, I'ma school them niggas like they baby Jody. Got it out the dust, now I'm too clean, don't know why they hate me. What you want out life, dawg? Guns and butter, baby boy. UPK top, dawg. Certified road runner. I'ma turn that econ line van to a damn tank. I got choppers stashed in the attic like they Air Frank. They had that shit on lock till I snapped on them like bolt cutters. You cannot play both sides, gotta choose your colors. See him throwing that one up with that W, that's my blood, bro. Fine then, I ain't show no mercy, I'm gon' show them boy what time it is. I pop out like I'm Samuel, I got time to kill. Haters thought I died, I survived. They don't know how I did it, got it out the dust, straight to glory. They don't know how I feel, he nice but he don't show them skills, how I show them skills. He ride but he don't work the wheel, how I work the wheel. Ooh, I got a made, circle tight, yeah, vacuum seal. Said they want my life, I ain't worried, I got rank for real.
Pando, kill the beat.
I don't know who, somebody need to hear this. Y'all don't speak Hebrew, that's Yiddish. How the fuck you try to label us anti-Semitic? We the Israelites, blacks, native Hispanics. The Germans getting locked up for the Holocaust. Meanwhile, black people still up in the Holocaust. 100 million of us died in the transatlantic. 6 million died, y'all want the world to never forget it. You can never be a Jew, you a Ashkenaz. This ain't a star dum-dum, a gun die or die. Yeah, Yeezy told the truth and got ostracized. Not one person in the Bible had on a yarmulke. We were slaves in America like we was in Egypt. Y'all don't even fit the curses in the Torah neither. Y'all was blind to the truth, I had to make it clear. How Jerusalem, your land, your people came from Europe. That was 1947, your menorah got 9 sticks, it's really only 7. Yeah, it's us against the world, Armageddon. This what happened when you inherit lies from your ancestors. Y'all the synagogue of Satan with them black hats. Your whole nation sitting ducks, Aflacs. Bunch of thieves and culture vultures, ain't nothing kosher. To tell the truth, you vagabonds don't have a culture. Macedonia, Alexander and Philip, you a convert, so tell me, how the fuck is you Israel? That don't make you the people just cause you litter. Why my people can't hate your people like y'all hate Hitler? All the prophets was black and was called nigga. Y'all don't even fit the description that's in the scriptures. Abraham, all the way down to Jacob, we the real Jews. Y'all don't study Christ, y'all follow the Talmud. Keep it real, yeah, let's keep it real. Cold heart. We was born fighting, y'all the evil twin. Jacob took hold of his heel, then out came his little red bass and they kosher deals. It's only 12 tribes, y'all trying to make it 13. Esau despised his birthright, the Lord cursed him. He ain't the devil, who is? I'm still searching. Ask your rabbi why he get them babies herpes. I don't know what's worse, that or you claiming that you a Maccabee. I'm about to cancel, everybody try to cancel ye. I ain't afraid to speak, that's what I do. They riding to the core, I'm just judging them by their fruit. Cause they ain't suffering curses. If I was carnal, I promise I'd punch you in person. I know this an uncomfortable subject. They making millions off our culture and black people suffering from it. Yeah, they don't believe in Christ, they the Antichrist. Make a living off of niggas, they a parasite. I ain't afraid to tell the truth, niggas terrified. I'm about to go DEFCON 4, I ain't satisfied.
That is proof. That is absolute proof that they know we are the real Jews. That's absolute.
Shalom, Israel. Yahweh Ba'Shem, Yahweh Shai Barak to the brothers watching. Yahweh Shamar Alatham Ba'Shem, Yahweh Shai to the sisters watching. This is ISUPK, started out at 1 West, 125th Street, Harlem, New York, under Commanding General Yohana. And since 1969, we've been teaching the truth about the Bible, that blacks, Hispanics, and Native American Indians are the real Jews, the 12 tribes of the lost nation of Israel. And you're tuned in with Priest and Officer 500 Howard Marr, and this is ISUPK Kentucky. And tonight what we're going to get into is a little bit of history on this word savage and why the indigenous people of North, Central, and South America, how we took on this title of savage, this proverb and this byword of savage. So if I may, I got a few articles. Then we're going to get into some pictures. And then, you know how we do it in ISUPK Kentucky, we're going to get into it with the scriptures. So the first article we're going to go with is called the article is called Noble Savage to Wretched Indian. All right, Noble Savage to Wretched Indian. And it starts off, some Europeans, like the American painter George Carlin, looked at the indigenous people of North America as a representation of indigenous people before Western civilization developed. Pure, bold, and noble beings. Such Europeans called the indigenous people they encountered noble savages. Now keep that word savage in mind, and we're going to break down what the word savage actually means. Caitlin was, according to one scholar, a steadfast champion of the noble savage myth, which described American Indians as independent beings of stately bearing, brave but honorable warriors, beautiful princesses, gifted orators, and creatures of innocence and simplicity living from the bounty of nature. In the 19th century, during the Romantic period, many European authors embraced the idea of the noble savage and used it to express their longing for simplicity, beauty, and deep connection to nature. So right here, this is where we get the myth of the savage. This is where we get the myth of the native Indians of North, Central, and South America didn't have any civilization to speak of, that we was just a bunch of naked people running around with feathers, teepees, right? And we're gonna get into this. It's all nonsense, and it's all propaganda. All right, it continues. During the expeditions throughout North America in 1830, George Catlin visited First Nations and recorded their customs and appearances and paintings and writings. The French poet, essayist, and critic Charles Baudelaire commented on Caitlin's paintings, captured the proud, free character and noble expression of these splendid fellows in a masterly way. It continues, by the middle of the 19th century, European policymakers became impatient with the slow progress of their efforts to civilize indigenous groups who insisted on maintaining their own traditions. So as if the traditions that we had already before European settlers got here, as if it wasn't civilized. So they thought it was their plan to civilize us. But we're going to get into later how we had a civilization much greater than theirs. And our civilization actually, they actually modeled their civilization after ours. So the article says this frustration was shown in yet another stereotype. Not only were the Indians savage, they were also known as wretched Indians. Charles Dickens, the most popular British writer of the mid-1800s, captured a change in the attitude in his essay, 1853, The Noble Savage. Before this essay was written, Dickens attended an exhibition in the works of George Caitlin. In the essay, Dickens reacts to the main theme of Caitlin's work, the nobility of the indigenous people, the artists encountered in North America. To come to the point at once, I beg to say that I have not the least belief in the noble savage. I consider him a prodigious nuisance and an enormous superstition. So Esau got a lot of nerve. This devil got a lot of nerve. This devil came here uninvited and then called us a nuisance, right? Didn't understand our culture, copied our culture, and then had the nerve to call us superstitious. The article continues, his calling, rum firewater, and meat paleface, whole folly to reconcile me to him. I don't care what he calls me, I'll call him a savage. And I'll call a savage as something highly desirable to be civilized off the face of the earth. So these people didn't only want to just civilize us as they claim, but their plan was to civilize us off the face of the earth. That's why they purposely gave us smallpox. The article continues, he is a savage, cruel, false, thievish, murderous, addictive, and has beastly customs. Now, if you read this, it says cruel, false, thievish, and murderous. Those are adjectives I can only give to one group of people on the earth. Cruel, false, thievish, and murderous only identify one people. That's the so-called oppressor, the devil. A wild animal with the questionable gifts of boasting, a conceited, tiresome, bloodthirsty, monotonous humbug. Now, it's funny they call us a wild animal. In the Bible, it actually calls the other nations the beasts of the field. So Esau is the real wild animal. He's got some nerve calling us an animal. He continues, yet it is extraordinary to observe how some people will talk about him as they talk about the good old times. There was Mr. George Cartman some few years ago with his Ojibwe Indians. Mr. Caitlin was an energetic, earnest man who had lived among more tribes of Indians than I need to reckon, and who had written a picturesque and glowing book about them, with his party of Indians squatting and spitting on the table before him, or dancing their miserable jigs after their own dreary manner. He called forth in all good faith upon his civilized audience to take notice of their symmetry, grace, perfect limbs, exquisite expression, and his civilized audience in good faith compiled and admired. Whereas mere animals, they were wretched creatures, very low in the scale and very poorly formed. So again, This article is quoting this devil named Caitlin, again calling us miserable in nature, noble savages, poorly formed, etc. It continues, my position is that if we have anything to learn from a noble savage, it is what to avoid. His virtues are fable, his happiness is a delusion, and his nobility is nonsense. Now we're going to get into nobility a little bit later when we get into these pictures we're going to bring out. But in the article it says that our nobility was nonsense. The world will be all the better when his place knows him no more. So this article, this devil named Caitlin was talking about this world to be a better place when this world knows him no more. All right, so now the next article we'll get into, it's going to talk about where the term savage came from and why it was applied to the indigenous people of North, Central, and South America. Now, this article is from the Atlantic. It is titled The Shameful Final Grievance of the Declaration of Independence. This is what we first called the Savage Act publicly in the Declaration of Independence. It reads, the revolution wasn't only an effort to establish independence from the British, it was also to push and preserve slavery and suppress Native American resistance. It reads, we hold these truths to be self-evident. Says these words, and many Americans will be able to recite what follows. That all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator certain unalienable rights, that amongst these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, we know in UPK, we know in the truth that when it says all men are created equal, it's not talking about us. It's talking about all white men are created equal. So it continues, the opening words of the Declaration of Independence, and easily, it's the most remembered part, are widely celebrated as signifying the beginning of an exceptional American history, one characterized, despite setbacks, by a progressive expansion of rights. The closing words of the Declaration of Independence are far less known. The last of a list of 27 grievances against King George III. Now, King George III, there might be a class for a different day. But anyway, they read as follows. He has excited domestic insurrections among us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. These words call to attention the hard truths about America's founding that have often been brushed aside. So right here, in their Declaration of Independence, this is where the so-called white man, the devil the Bible speaks of, first called the indigenous people of the Americas savages. It continues, the 27th grievance raises two issues. The first, the king's incitement of domestic insurrections refers to slave revolts and reveals a hard truth recently brought to the public's attention by the New York Times Magazine 1619 Project. Some of those who sought independence aimed to protect the institution of slavery. This was particularly true for Virginia slave owners, who were deeply disturbed by the proclamation issued in November 1775 by Virginia Governor Lord Dunmore, which proposed enslaved people held by revolutionaries freedom in exchange for joining the British Army. Virginians and other Southerners feared that it would provoke widespread slave revolts. Edward Rutledge, who later became governor of South Carolina, declared that Dunmore's proclamation would do more than any other effort to work an eternal separation between Great Britain and the colonies. And George Washington called Dunmore that arch traitor to the rights of humanity. It continues. The second hard truth exposed by the 27th grievance and its racist depiction of Native Americans as merciless Indian savages. So again, here comes this word savage again. Has generated much less public discussion. In indicting the king for unleashing Indians on the inhabitants of our frontiers, the declaration was not referring to a specific event, but rather the recent escalation of violence which was caused by colonists invading the lands west of the Appalachian Mountains. In response, a confederation of Seneca, Shawnee, Delaware, Ottawa, and Cherokee. Now, if I may, these names right here are also proverbs and bywords. The so-called Cherokee didn't call themselves Cherokee, right? The Seneca didn't call themselves Seneca. These are also names that the oppressor, the so-called white man, the devil the Bible speaks of, gave to these people. Anyway, another Native American nations exercised the right of self-defense and attacked new colonial settlements. Although the Native nations had British support, they were acting on their own and not at the instigation of the Crown. Nevertheless, Thomas Jefferson declared the Declaration's primary drafter, hoped that by fanning the flames of settlers, anti-Indian racism, and implicating George III, he could ignite a general conflagration against the British and the West. So what it's talking about is King George III was trying to make treaties with the Native Indians to have the Native Indians fight on the side of the British in the Revolutionary War. But here's the problem. We were either going to be second-class citizens here or third-class citizens under the British, because anybody under the British crown was considered a subject. And anybody knows anything about nationality, there's three different levels of citizenship. You have national, you have subject, you have national, citizen, then you have subject. So if we would have went with the British, we would have been third-class citizens with them. It continues. In this way, the 27 grievance helped lay the foundation for an American nationalism that would demonize the continent's indigenous people, especially when they resisted American aggression. It continues. Although the reference to the merciless Indian savage appealed to the inhabitants of our frontiers, Jefferson and others who signed the Declaration had their own reasons for detesting British policies relating to Native Americans and their lands. More than a decade earlier, in order to end the costly war to suppress an indigenous resistance movement led by the Ottawa War leader Pontiac, the King issued the Proclamation of 1763, which recognized indigenous ownership of lands west of the Appalachian Mountains. Go ahead, sir.
I didn't want to cut in. You're dropping it so heavy.
Go ahead, sir.
But what I want to add and what you're saying is the names you brought up. The Native Indian names.
Yeah.
We down here in Louisville, Kentucky, and it's like 4 areas named after that. We got Shawnee Park.
Mm-hmm.
We got Iroquois.
Mm-hmm.
You feel me? We got all these Seneca High School.
Mm-hmm.
You feel me? We got all these Native Indian names down here, and these people down here in Kentucky don't even know. They walking on the bones of the Native Indians. They don't even know it. They didn't took the names of it and propped it up as mascots.
Mm-hmm.
You feel me? But so I just wanted to bring that out. If you bring it out, it's so heavy.
I had if I may, I had a joke. Me and Officer Assad had a running joke that we wasn't going to eat buffalo wings anymore because of the slaughter of the buffalo.
Right.
They ain't last too long though. All right, it continues. At first glance, ordinary settlers might be expected to have the proclamation's major opponents. Some settlers did object, but the most potent source of opposition came from colonial elites, especially in Virginia and Pennsylvania, who had invested in companies with claims to lands west of the boundaries set by the proclamation. So it mentions companies. See, what a lot of people have to realize is that it was businesses that was making this happen, right? Virginia, the state of Virginia was actually named after the Virginia Tobacco Company, right? There was actually a company that was in charge of the transatlantic slave trade. It was called the Royal African Company. There was companies, there was businesses that was making all this money. But it continues, unless those lands could be legally settled, land companies could not gain secure title to their claims. See, it's using words like legally settled and secure title. These are all business words. Investors would be left with nothing but the debts they had incurred to bet on getting rich. 1767, George Washington, one of the era's most passionate land speculators, predicted that the proclamation must fall in a few years. British imperial officials made some adjustments to the 1763 boundary, but despite Washington's hopes and those of other speculators such as Thomas Jefferson, British policy continued to restrict colonists' perceived liberty to obtain indigenous lands. And all this, according to the article, all this was done to try to get the indigenous people, the Northern Kingdom of Israel, to fight on the side of the British against the colonists in the American Revolution. It continues, colonists found the 1774 Quebec Act one of the intolerable acts, particularly odious. Not only did the Quebec Act grant legal protection to Catholicism, a religion Protestants despise, but it extended Quebec's boundary south to the Ohio River and blocked settlement in the Ohio Valley. At the First Continental Congress, Richard Lee, a delegate from Virginia, called the Quebec Act the worst grievance of them all. 2 years later, when Virginia broke with Great Britain, its state constitution claimed lands west of the Mississippi, thus nullifying the proclamation of 1763 and the Quebec Act. It continues, even as colonists declared their independence from Britain, indigenous people were preparing to defend their own freedom. Long experience had led Native Americans to believe that colonists intended not only to take their land, but to kill them all. In the summer of 1776, an unnamed Shawnee, part of the delegation of Mohawks, Shawnee, Ottawas, Delawares, urged Cherokees to join a confederation to resist the colonists, warning that the Virginians had referred all colonists possessed an intention to extirpate the red people. Similarly, after the Revolutionary War broke out, the Mohawk leader, Joseph Brant, declared that it was the intention of another group of colonists, the Bostonians, to exterminate the Mohawks and other members of the Six Nations Confederacy. The term genocide did not yet exist, but their words conveyed the same idea. Native people were terrified that unshackled colonists would kill them wholesale. So, earlier in the article, it said that the colonizers, one of the words that they used to describe us was murderous, right? But it says right here that the indigenous people had a fear that the inhabitants of Boston were going to exterminate us. It continues, the indigenous perspective returns to the 27th grievance. Jefferson's denigration of merciless Indian savage signaled that the war for independence from Great Britain would also be a brutal war to seize indigenous lands. From 1776 to 1783, U.S. troops and colonial militias destroyed more than 70 Cherokee towns and at least 10 multi-ethnic towns in the Ohio Valley, killing several hundred people and subjecting refugees to starvation, disease, and death. In the decades to come, the U.S. presidents, Washington and Jefferson included, would call for the extermination of Native Americans who fought against dispossession. Several U.S. armies would try to do precisely that. So it's been pretty common in the world lately that it's coming out that Blacks, Hispanics, and Native American Indians are the real Jews according to the Bible. Something that the UPK has been saying since 1969. And we have Jewish people that never want to forget the so-called Holocaust. But it says right here in this article that Washington and Jefferson would call for the extermination of Native Americans who fought against dispossession. So what it's saying is that if we resisted their push to take our lands away, they will call for our extermination. And we always hear about George Washington and Thomas Jefferson with such righteous men, such upright men. But people like Washington and Jefferson actually called for our extermination. It continues. The 1619 Project has made an enormous contribution to public understanding of slavery, often referred to as America's original sin. Although critics of the 1619 Project have tried to minimize slavery's importance and its centrality to the creation of America and its disturbing legacies, it's well established in the scholarly literature and becoming clear to the public. Even so, the 27th grievance reveals that the original sin at America's founding was twofold. America was built by the labor of enslaved people, and it was built on the stolen lands and the genocide of indigenous people. To understand where the country is now is to imagine a truly just future. America needs to reckon with both sides of these hard truths. Well, we already know the so-called white man isn't going to reckon with any of this. So we hear this word savage. We've heard this word savage repeatedly. So let's get a definition of the word savage. And we're going to go to etymology dictionary. It says savage, a noun from the 1400s, a wild person, a human being from an uncivilized region, tribe, or race of the lowest state of development. From savage, 1600s, as unfeeling, brutal, or cruel person, whether civilized or not. So let's break this down real quick. It says from an uncivilized region, meaning a savage is uncivilized, and from the lowest state of development, meaning we don't have any developments. We don't have writing, we don't have buildings, we don't have culture, religion, etc. Now this is going to continue. To continue with this definition, to continue with this definition of savage, savage, adjective, mid-13th century, of animals, ferocious, 1300s, wild, undomesticated, untamed, also wild, uncultivated, of land or places, from Old French savage, wild, savage, untamed, strange, pagan. From Latin, it's a Latin word that means the forest. All right, so it continues, it talks about animals, right? Being ferocious, being undomesticated, being wild, and uncultivated. Uncultivated just means that they're saying we don't have a culture to speak of. If we go back into the definition is going to continue. All right. A person's indomitable, valiant, fierce, bold, cruel. In the late 14th century, persons of behavior, wild, barbarous, uncivilized. From the 1400s, reckless, ungovernable. And by the 1610s, as pertaining to or characteristic of savage peoples living in the lowest condition of development. heraldry, naked, or clothed in foliage is from the 1570s. Let's break this down. Persons that are fierce, bold, and cruel. Persons of behavior, wild, barbarous, and uncivilized. So again, it's talking about somebody who doesn't have a civilization. From the 1400s, as reckless and ungovernable. So it says that not only are we ungovernable, that a savage person doesn't even have a government, right? So what they're claiming when they call us savage is that we didn't have a government when they came here. All right, by the 1610s, as pertaining to a characteristic of savage people living in the lowest condition of development. It says in heraldry, naked or clothed in foliage. This is where we get the idea of the naked savage Indians. So keep some of these terms in mind. Indomitable, wild, barbarous, uncivilized, ungovernable, naked, right? And we're gonna get into some old pictures here. If I may. And I think we'll start in Central America. I think a lot of people are familiar when the Spaniards came to Mexico, but we're often not told about what was found here when the Spaniards got to Mexico. So this right here is the image. This right here is an image of Cortez and the emperor of the Aztecs, Montezuma. Now the Aztecs are the Mexicans today, the biblical tribe of Issachar, the chosen people of God. Now if we look again, we have the Spaniard Cortez with Montezuma. Now if you look in the background, what do you see? I don't see people who are uncivilized. I don't see people who don't have a civilization. What I see is a palace in the background here. Now, again, this is an image of what Cortez and the Spaniards saw when they got to Mexico. And again, if you look in the back, looks like a palace to me. Now, if anybody in the comments wants to add, tell me what you see. I see a palace. What do y'all see? All right, the next picture. So lucky for being a little slow here. I'm just getting this figured out myself. Right, the next picture we're going to get into. Right here. This was the Aztec capital. Again, the Aztecs being the people of Mexico, the biblical tribe of Issachar. And if you look, there's pyramids, there's columns. I don't see people who are uncivilized here. You understand? I see people who have an incredible civilization that we're not told about. Right? So you see pyramids here, obelisk here. Right? Now you might ask, how would the Aztecs have Egyptian-looking pyramids and Egyptian-looking obelisks? Well, if you've been watching the UPK, we've been saying since 1969 that the Mexicans are the biblical tribe of Issachar. So we knew how to build pyramids and obelisks because our ancestors were in ancient Egypt. All right, next picture. Now, this is going to be a close-up of the Aztec emperor, a brother named Montezuma, right? And this is a close-up of a painting that was done in the early 1600s, like somewhere like 1624 or something. And if you look, it's got Montezuma, it's got the feathers. But if you look in the background, there's a building here. There's a building with a dome on it, and you see the pillars right here in the front. Now take a look at this building. Now I want you to think about how the Capitol buildings look in every state. So if you live in Kentucky, how the Capitol building looks in Frankfurt, right? Or how the Capitol building looks in DC, or how the Capitol building looks in Madison, Wisconsin. Salaki, so what's the capital of Illinois? Springfield. Do they have a Capitol building? Does it look like this? So this is where Esau, the oppressor, the devil that the Bible speaks of, this is where he got his idea for the Capitol building. Not only the Capitol building in DC, but the Capitol building in every state across America. So again, you got the dome, you got the pillars in the front, and now this Google U.S. Capitol building, and you'll see it right here. All right, so the next picture we'll get into. And there you have it. All right, so the next picture. Yeah, they ain't slick, sir. They ain't slick at all. All right, so the next picture we'll get into. Let's go to North America. Let's go to North America. All right. So Ponce de Leon was the Spaniard that supposedly discovered Florida. All right, Ponce de Leon was the Spaniard that supposedly discovered Florida. And he discovered Florida in 1513, 1512, 1513. Now, if you look at the picture, it shows the shape of Florida at the bottom. It shows some native Indians fighting some Spaniards. You got a picture of Ponce de Leon in the front. Now, these would be your Seminole type Indians, your Muskogee Indians. We know in the UPK, the biblical tribe of Reuben. But if you look in the picture, it's a brick building, right? Meaning that the Seminole Indians, the tribe of Reuben, the chosen people of God, were building with brick and stone. So if we were savages, if we didn't have any civilization, any government, why is this brick and stone building right here, right? With a picture of the colonizer, Ponce de Leon, on the front. So again, if we're savages, why is this stone brick building here? All right. Next picture we'll get into. Let's stay in North America for a minute. Let's stay in North America for a minute. All right. So this right here is a map of the southeastern United States. You can see Florida, you can see Mississippi, Alabama, etc. You can see the Mississippi River. Now this is a map of 1542. No, Salaki. This is a map of from the 1580s, right? From the 1580s. Now again, if the Spaniards first so-called discovered Florida in 1513, and they didn't discover Alabama and Georgia until 1540, this is a map of the 1580s. So if you look at all these little dots here, those are all cities, right? So if you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, at least 20, are you telling me that in 40 years, a boatload of Spaniards built up 20 cities? And if I could zoom into the picture, you'll see the buildings in these cities depicted on this map. You mean to tell me that these Spaniards in 40 years built 20 cities? in the southeastern United States? Now, if you believe that, then you might believe in white supremacy.
If you hold down control and alt, you can zoom in, like you were saying.
Control Alt.
And then take the mouse and take that little button and scoot it up. Go to
Okay.
you reading on Facebook. It's Facebook.
You said Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
Go here.
And then zoom in.
Oh, hold on. Oh, that's the wrong way. That's not gonna let me zoom in any further. But anyway, again, if you believe that in 40 years the Spaniards built up 20 cities, you might believe in white supremacy. And I got a better one for y'all. I got a better one. This is an earlier map of Florida. Slovakia. All right, right here. Is it a delay?
That's YouTube.
No, we all good. All right. So this right here is another map of the southeastern United States. Now this map is from 1542, right? This map is from 1542. And you can see Florida at the bottom right. You can see Cuba. You can see the Gulf Coast. But if you look right here in the middle, there's a castle. Now I don't care how anybody how any historian might try to spin it. I see a castle, right? I don't know what anybody else sees, and I don't know how any historian would try to downplay this, but I see a castle depicted on a map in the Gulf Coast region in 1542, right? Now, if this is Alabama or Georgia, in that region, the Spanish didn't discover that region until 1540. This map is from 1542. That means that the Spanish in 2 years built a gigantic castle in the southeast United States. Again, if you believe that, you might believe in white supremacy. All right, get this next picture. And we'll go to all right, anyway. This picture here is also from the 1500s, and this shows the southwestern United States. Now, there was a so-called myth about 7 golden cities that the Spaniards were trying to reach. And these are the 7 golden cities depicted on this map right here. All right, according to legend, the natives of the southwestern United States, the tribe of Gad, the biblical tribe of Gad, the chosen people of God, had 7 golden cities. And the Spaniards depicted it on this map right here with castles and everything. So again, these are the same type of castles that was depicted on the other map. Am I supposed to believe the Spaniards built this too? Now, if the Spaniards built it, why were they looking for it? If it was a myth to the Spaniards, if it was a legend, why were they looking for it? Right? So if you believe the Spaniards built this, again, you might believe in white supremacy. So that's North America. Let's go to South America. The biblical tribes of Asher and Naphtali. You know what? Before we go to South America, let's get back to North America. Now, this is the image. As you can see, it says America, right? You got natives. You look at the left, there's a castle, right? There's a cannon. There's cannons in the castle. So at the bottom right, or to the right of the picture, you see some Europeans. They look French by the way that the hats are. You look to the far left, you see more Europeans. But if you look right in the middle, you look at the white boy in the middle, looks like he's carrying this indigenous person on some kind of seat, on some kind of throne, right? Now, again, I don't know how any historian might try to spin this, but this white boy looks like a slave to me. And if anybody sees anything different in the chat or in the comments, Salaki, in the comments, tell me something different. But this devil, the real animal, the real savage, looks like a slave to me. And again, there's a castle on the left, and there's cannons coming out of the castle. All right. We'll do one more picture from North America. One more picture from North America. All right. So this is a depiction of the indigenous people of Mississippi. Right? Now also, first thing you'll notice is that you've got different complexions and different hair textures in the indigenous people of Mississippi. Right? This brother here is dark skinned with an afro. You've got the people on the far left that are lighter skinned with straighter hair. So even from the beginning, you had different complexions, facial features, and hair textures of the indigenous people. Now I want you to look at the garments of the brothers in the middle. That doesn't look savage to me. That looks royal to me. Matter of fact, I had an idea for some garments for the Passover. I might have to clip that if I may. Anybody watching, I need something like this for the Passover. Either one in the middle here will work for me. I need something like this for the Passover. All right. We just got just a few more before we get into the scriptures. We got just a couple. Let's go to South America. All right. So this is from a French author in the 1700s, a historical journey through Brazil. And if you look at the people, in the picture and look at the buildings in the back. Now in the article, didn't it say that the so-called white man, it was his idea to civilize us? Well, the buildings in this picture look like civilization to me, and I don't see a white person in the picture. So if the so-called white man, the devil the Bible speaks of, civilized us, how come I don't see a single white person in this picture with a gigantic building in the background? Again, if anybody sees anything different, let me know. Not Tyrone. Not Tyrone. All right. Did I have any more from South America? Thought I went through this pretty quick. No, I don't have any more from South America. It's lucky. I thought I had more. Anyway. Let's get into some scriptures here. First scripture we're going to get into is the book of Job, chapter 9, verse 24. All right, the book of Job, chapter 9, verse 24. And it reads, the earth is given into the hand of the wicked. He covereth the faces of the judges thereof. If not, where and who is he? Now, this land over here was definitely given into the hands of the wicked, the oppressor, the so-called white man, the devil the Bible speaks of. And it says, he covereth the faces of the judges. Well, if we're the judges, and the faces of the judges have been covered thereof, the history of the people of the Americas has definitely been covered, has definitely been hidden. Count. I see you gotta be quick with this, don't you?
It goes fast. When it's live, it seems slow. When it comes, you watch it over.
Right. Count, sir. So again, Job 9 and 24, the earth is given into the hands of the wicked. He covereth the faces of the judges thereof. If not, where and who is he? Well, this place was definitely given into the hands of the wicked. The next scripture is going to be from the book of Deuteronomy. Book of Deuteronomy, chapter 28, verse 37. All right, the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 28, verse 37. And thou shalt become an astonishment, a proverb, and a byword among all nations, whither the Lord shall lead thee. So the main thing we were talking about today was this word savage, right? This word savage, whether it was noble savage, wretched savage, right? This word savage is a proverb and a byword, right? Even the names that we use today, like Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Aztec, Mayan, Olmec, these aren't the names that we called ourselves prior to colonization. So even the names we use today, like Cherokee, is a proverb and a byword. It's not the names that we went by. So the book of Deuteronomy 28 and 37, and thou shalt become an astonishment, a proverb, and a byword among all the nations whither the Lord shall lead thee. So we'll drop that. And the last scripture is going to be from the book of Psalms, chapter 83, verse 4. The book of Psalms, chapter 83, verse 4 reads, they have said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. So we've heard from the articles today and the pictures that we broke down, these people have definitely cut us off from being a nation. Again, they don't even call us by the names that we went by before they even got here. Again, names like Cherokee, Aztec, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Menominee, Olmec, Mayan, Inca. These aren't even the names that we use for ourselves. These are names that they called us, right? And again, that word savage. So it says they have said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation. Didn't it say in the article that we read that if we resisted colonization, that they would exterminate us off the face of the earth? So again, these people have definitely cut us off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may no more be in remembrance. So with that, we'll end it. Shalom, Yahweh B'Hashem, Yahweh Shah Barakatham to the brothers watching. Yahweh Shamar Alatham B'Hashem, Yahweh Shah to the sisters watching. This has been ISUPK Kentucky. And with that, we'll end it. Like this, everyone. Where's the button?